So we later on will publish the recording on the website. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Jonas Bilenas, who has over 20 years of experience working with SAS, I would say, for various
35 years.
35 years. I apologize. Over 35 years of experience working with SAS. And in this presentation, you will share with us the power of PROC format. So without further ado, Jonas, over to you.
Okay. This is a very large presentation, so I may have to skip over some slides. Kajal Tahiliani has helped me out a couple of times in some of the presentations, so I included her name in this presentation as well. How do I advance the slide? Here we go. All right, so we're going to use how to use SAS internal INFORMATS and formats, and why use a PROC format, which is a little easier to use than if then else. I remember the first time I was looking at some data and code, I asked the person, why is this value mapping into two different labels? The person didn't know which one was which. I took the last label. We look at use control in to read data sets that also generate formats and INFORMATS. And with the different applications, we could find unexplained values. We could show creating user INFORMATs, different syntax rules for PROC format. And there's a lot of data step applications, variable assignment, large data extracts and merges. I was working at a large banking company, and the people came over to me. It was late in the in the evening, and he says, we got a data set of like 35,000 observations. We want to match to their 1 month's previous month's transaction data, what they're charging, what they're paying, but we can't do it because there's maybe 60, 70 tapes that you have to sort. So okay, I'll get your matched data set in about 10 minutes. And we'll look at picture formats, also multi-label formats. Okay, so now, images. So now the concept of INFORMATS are typically used just to read in data. So it's typically used in a data set. In format, it's used in a data set as well, and also used in different procs. From PROC front through any other procedure, you would just say, the format is for this variable is the one you generated. And this is just a simple example, typical of what we're looking at when we're looking at data, flat file data. So we have an ID number, which is 123. The record date, we're using an informative date 9, and we have a zip code. Again, we have really, it is a number, but when we print it out, we will lose the leading 0, and the temperature and the sex. So do PROC contents, the PROC print. Here's the contents. Look, we got some weird stuff. The date doesn't look the same as what we looked at the initial data. We lost a 0 in Jersey. And also we had a problem with the temperature of 10.1, which is really 101.9. It's not 101, 101, yeah, 101.9. So how would we fix this? 3 errors. I always wear a beard around wintertime so I can entertain kids when they look at me and say, "You Santa?" I say, yeah. All right. Now, also the problem with the number here has to do with using the w.d format. Typically, if that variable has or has a decimal point, you don't need the d. And if it even if it doesn't have a decimal point, you don't need the d. So it's best to change it as 5 dot, whereas the previous one we used was 5.1 to account for the decimal point, but it's already in the data, so you don't need this .1. And we put some formats. You can do it in the data set, or you can also do it in the PROC print. So we're having this date format, and this zip format. This is like a zone decimal. Yeah, so it retains the 0. So here we have the 0 return, and here we have the corrected value for the temperature. And we'll just skip over some of these. So why are we going to look at formats? So the format will take a one-to-one lookup. So this is the value we're looking at. This is the label. And let's look at an example where we're looking at a FICO credit score, where these are like subprime customers. These are pretty fair to excellent customers, and other ranges were unable to score. So let's look at the code. So you could do it in a code without using a format. So if score is less than 670, then the score group is 670 negative. If also the score is less than or equal to 900, then the score is 671 plus. Else score group is unscored. Now, unfortunately, we didn't indicate the length of this variable. So if you look at the data, you'll see it gets truncated to only the 4 bytes that are allocated initially. It's a bug. Some more of my dogs. So now you can do this in PROC format. You do this before the either you don't even before the procedure, so you don't even need a data set. So you have load to 670. Is this labeled? These ranges are that label, and this is others as unscored. And we see everything works out nicely, and we didn't even have to indicate a length for the label. Okay, let's look at finding unexpected values. Let's say we want to see what's outside this range. You could do it like this, where you have it's only a single format for 370 and 900, and it will be applied. If there is no range specified, it will dump out the actual value if there's enough room within this particular space. So we see we have 9,003. Well, the credit bureaus a lot of times will not have blanks for missing values. They will have different numbers specified. I don't remember what 9,003, but I think it means that the person's dead. And then like 3 other reasons where they really couldn't provide a valid score. And I guess if you're dead, you have a good score, so it's a nice high number. You could, if you shorten the label, it's not going to look that nice. It's going to look as stars. So the best thing is to do it. You can embed in a format. And now it shows up as being the values that and if they're in the range, it's going to be outputted as okay. All right. So in formats I don't play around too much with, but this is an interesting example. I think I first saw it from I forgot his name, but we're looking at character variables embedded with numeric variables. So we can read these records using an INFORMAT to change over these character expressions into the normal variables, and on the US side is 98.6. And it works fine using to create an INFORMAT to read the temperature variable. So this new format temp we'll read it numeric as numeric, and if you get into norm or norm all caps, it will revert it to numbers. All right, the different syntax rules, the values or the keys are either separated by commas or in ranges. So the smallest to the biggest range, A to B, and you can also go from anything greater than A up to B, anything great from A to less than B, and anything from greater than A to less than B. Let's see what next. You also have some other special values or key values. Lowest for the lowest numeric variable, for character variables, the smallest variable, the highest value, and others. So missing indications are not mapped with the formats. So the character formats begin with a $, and with SAS 9, finally we can get up to a format name up to 32 bytes and an in format up to 31 bytes. I don't know why they lost a byte there. Oh, it is. I did publish a book back in 2005 called The Power of PROC Format, but it stopped being printed. I don't know why, but maybe you can bug SAS and say, you have a copy of PROC Format? All right, so now we'll look at some applications. And we can use different functions in the data set using put and input functions. Put, you take a variable and you do a format. The put always returns a character type variable, even if using numeric variables. And input is to return a variable dependent on the informat. So if you're informatting as a numeric, that variable will be numeric. So here we're sort of assigning a credit line to different scores. There's a different score than a FICO score. So if you have a higher score, you get a better credit limit. And now we want to create a new variable line and put the score as STX. So if a score is like 185, you're going to get $5,000 line. And like I said, we'll put always going to return a character value, but we want to use this value as a numeric variable. So you use an input and use the best 12 or any other numeric formats. Now you can also use ranges using dates. We would have to specify this as as a date variable, and you can specify these will be the different costs for different dates. You can also do a two-dimensional table lookup, which is kind of we're going to have to finish this presentation in 5 minutes. It's sort of kind of tricky, but you could do you can first set up the format to read using a format, and then read those formats for those balances. And then you would just go back to this input put. Now the put n says that this value is not a format. It's a variable that indicates what format you should use. So if you want Inc. A, again, depending on your credit scores, you'll get these values.
Jonas, it could take a bit longer time if you need to. So just
Okay.
usually the question side all the way in,
Yeah.
but it's up until the end of the hour that we can have the call overall, and people usually tend to stay up until the end of the hour.
Okay, that's good. So here's, okay, now using this in macros. You can't have a macro do I equals A, C, X. But what you can do is do a macro. So you do a loop, 1 equals A, 2 equals C, 3 equals X, as going to be the macro variable. And now here you could do the real way of doing it is doing J equals 1 to 3. And you're going to let, so now you can use a sysfunc function to use to put n macro variable function of taking this value 1, 2, or 3 and mapping it into the loopy variable. So 1 equals A, 2 equals C, and 3 equals X. Why is that floating around? And it sort of got weird when I got. You normally can't have a double label. So here 0 is negative or positive. That was kind of weird. But it shows up anyway. 0 is going to be negative. 1's positive and 23 positive. The way you can handle this is you put a less than sign there, and then it won't include the 0 as a negative. It will include the 0 as a positive. Okay, make sure you don't play with the WD because if I did, it's automatically going to put a decimal point, 4 decimal points to the left of this 1. So that was a mistake. So these will work as better. 6 bytes are best, or 8 bytes. Okay, this is the large data extracts. And people were coming up to me and said, we need to find match these accounts to their transactions over the last 2 months. And it was going 1 to 2 tapes a day of, I was going to extract that information. So with large data sets, it's best to create a special data set which will be processed by PROC format. And that's a control in data set. And basically you need a couple of different variables. We need a format name is the name of the format to be created. The type of the format, whether it's the type of the variables, is caret C, N, or I for in format. You need the start of the value. And if there's a range, you need an end, and then there's a label. So you need to generate a format with control in option to point to the data set in PROC format. So here's the example. I'm taking the small data of 35,000 or even 1 million observations, and I want to sort because I don't want duplicate keys because it's going to say it's got multi-labeling. You can't have a multiple label. And then what it'll do is dump this into a data called FMT, and retain the format name, which is the $ account, the type of the variable. These are characters, and the label is yes. I need those guys, and output. And then at the end of the file, yes, end of the file, I need to create something about other conditions. So the start is blank, the label equals no, and the HLO, high-low other, is other. And I put that particular record. So if you have 1,000,000 records, this data set will have 1,000,001 record. And now you just say proc format, the control in is this data set created here. And now you can mash up or extract files from the big files, the 16 tapes. You would set each tape, and where you want to capture only that row where the account number matches the one you're looking at. They were surprised I was able to get that done pretty fast. I was also working with a large data set from a company that has information about everybody in the country. And some of the stuff they were doing with SQL were taking 2 days to do. So I said, let's just, if you want to capture some people, let's look at proc format up way of doing it with a control in. And it took like 10 minutes to run. And the nice thing about a proc format, it uses a binary search. So if you have 1,000,000 records, I think you only need to look at 15 records that's included in the formats that you actually want to look at, the labels you want to look at, the accounts you want to look at. Now, also, you can't copy and paste this control in file. Oh, you can probably, but you can't copy and paste. I don't think you can copy and paste from, let's say, a Unix to a PC. But what you could do is to do a control out and then copy that into your PC and then bring it back to another, to let's say, a SAS server or something. And now you could use that as your control in data set. So what we're looking at here. Oh, this is a control out, so you get a lot of information. Now, multi-label, I don't use it that much, but where you want to have one-to-many, one-to-one, which is approved by proc formats, or you need to modify it if you're going to match it out to other a label. So here we have A1 for approval, A2 for a weak approval, A4 is approval for an alternate product, and then we have D1 is decline for credit, D6 decline for other reasons. Typically, this would be maybe 30, 40 different reasons for the decline and different ways of approval. So we may want to put these labels to these labels, but also include it in the group called approve. And these labels are mapping to these, but also mapping to a label called decline. So you need to specify this as a multi-label. Now, the other option here I use is not sorted. And not sorted is I want the same output to be alphabetized as I did here, or the order I've done here. Oh, a picture here. We'll come at that later. But picture here, you can convert stuff into percent in a tabulate. So I'm going to tabulate here. I'm formatting. I'm formatting the results of percent n, what percentage of accounts are in different groups, as PCT. But if it's a negative percent, you've got to do a prefix, and if it's positive, it's going to put out as a non-prefix label. So here we get the results, and the percents are all there. Because tabulate never shows a percent. I don't know why. Decline. And if you dump this into Excel, let's say this is character you want to convert to numeric, say yes. And when I got these things to work well. You can also use a lot of dates as a value to map labels that are tied to specific dates. And this is a lot of times I use for macroeconomic data, macroeconomic data in the U.S. or by zip code or by state. And you can use leg and forward, lead functions. There is no lead in a data set. There is a lag in the function in a data step. I would say there was papers that never used the lag function conditionally because the the lag is only going to take the previous lag that you ran. So it's better just to put them into format labels. So we got date, index is different numeric variables in their microeconomic. And then we do the same data format. And it generates different formats for different column variables. Now, when you have more than one format you want to create, you have to, once you get this data set generated, you have to sort by the format name. That may be in some older papers I had. And you can also generate the format catalog, save it in a particular path. So here I want to say, typically the default name would be library, and you can indicate where that data is going to be, that catalog is going to be stored. And then you can say PROC format, control format, and say library is equal to this library. And then when you run the code, you have to specify initially what the library destination is. So now we have data information, and then we're mapping the dates into say consumer price index. And we could do say moving average. This is more using the date functions, int and x. So you want to go back 4 months, you want to go ahead maybe 5 months or so, and you can generate the results using without even just reading the data and then adding these format data values in the plots. And we can also go into the future. Right now, working with using the format is stored in the SAS workspace, but you can create the format using, like we did before, the library option. You can also have more than one, you need in this options, SAS system option format search, to search where you may have more than one sort of source in your Linux or Unix directories. Again, if you have more than one location, you have to specify format search. There may be formats you're using in the different libraries. You could also do if you want to see if you may have lost the code, you may want to look at FMTLib. So it'll specify information about the formats you have in a particular library. And this is probably in a workspace. So you can sort of derive what is the mapping of the formats. You can also make some comments or contents. You can look at what you have in one. They're all in one catalog. You can modify, put new descriptions in as what that format name is related to. And so when you run this, you get this information, contents, and description. Now we're going to look at the picture formats, which it sort of looks like a Halloween. You can make people look different using costumes, and that's sort of what a picture does. Picture formats provides templates for printing numbers typically. It's also can be used for printing date and time information. The template contains digit selectors that specify how the numbers will be displayed. Put a 0 is a placeholder for digit. If a digit exists, it gets printed. If not, it does not get printed. If 9 or any other digit other than 0, that absolute placeholder then forces the number to be printed, even if it's 0. And you can also embed characters. So if you have a negative mapping, you need to do a prefix of minus, and also there's other other prefixes, and you can also multiply numbers by different factors. So it'll be a multi option. So here we're looking at an example we did before. I know percent sum is always going to be positive, so I don't have to worry about the negative numbers. And now it's going to output with a percent sign at the end. That particular output we get from PROC tabular. But you look at this here, and you say this should be 50.4. This is driving me crazy for a couple of months, and I went around it. I'm reading through the PROC format results in 1986. There are very few manuals in those days, and there's a round option. So if you want to round your numbers with a picture format, you need to do a PROC, whatever you're calling it, and make sure to round it rather than truncate, because by default it's going to truncate. So now it's actually working. So yeah, so we use that same code, but we might put a round option. And here's adding negative values and whatnot. You gotta be careful, because a lot of times they think if you're creating your own picture format and you don't have a large enough width, they won't even tell you any warnings. So they say, you know what you're doing. So if you have a minus 50,000, it's only going to come out as -0. So you have to be careful on adding more zeros into your label output. Okay, now we're going to multiply. Your boss wants to look at numbers in terms of 1,000. So we say, okay, we have enough zeros. We have a negative dollar sign. We have a number of, and now we're going to multiply everything by 1,000. So yeah, that works. That's 0. That's 1M. We're going to end with an M. Yeah, at the end. You can add other characters. You can add comments. You can add dashes if you're doing telephone numbers, and that seems to work. But now the boss wants a precision number after that. So instead of rounding to the dollar, let's round to, doesn't make sense here. Let's round to an additional decimal place after the decimal place. And multiply by 1E3, which is dividing by 1,000. And you're sort of not getting the results you expected. So what you have to do, since you've added a decimal point, but you don't have one here, the multiplying is actually 1E minus 3, adding another minus. So you're dividing by 10,000, not 10,000. So to fix that, you just shorten this to a 2, and it'll add the third one to the right of the decimal point, and it'll work correctly. Sometimes you may have to specify multi equals 1 when you have the values here with the right number of decimal places. Oh, that's it. Oh, I went too fast. All right. Any questions? Am I still here?
Yep.
Okay.
That's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Has anyone got any questions?
Yeah, almost all my code has formats. And usually I put them into a catalog and leave them there. It's like a macro catalog. You put your macros in a catalog.
Absolutely. Do you, from your experience, do you code in any other languages? Do you know any other language that has a similar functionality when it comes to formats? Of course, we talked about COBOL earlier.
Well, yeah, I'm pretty much a SAS guy, so I love SAS.
If you have a couple minutes, could you show again your slide about the sort of two-dimensional formats where you use the input n?
Okay, yeah, that's sort of confusing.
That was,
yeah.
Well, it's cool, and you think hash table, but then see that and like it's an interesting, different way at the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, here we go. So we're looking at if you have your income as this values and your score, so the higher your income, the higher the score, the larger the result you want to map to these labels, and this is the label you're going to get. So the first thing I say if you're in this range, call it the format name I want to name this particular row. So it's Inc A, Inc B, Inc C, Inc D, Inc C. So the A, now I created my own format for Inc A, and that's just taking mapping this income to 500, this income to 750, this to 1,000, this to 1,250. And we got those numbers here. Your label should be put in quotes, but this will work. But and it also work to make the output look more readable than if it was wrapping around. So I'm basically then creating these 5 formats. These are formats are mapped. We want to map these to formats depending on your. But that's not going to be dependent on the score. Yes, if your score is 160, yeah, it's dependent on the score. So you're going to take the score, and it says format used. You put the score and use the score F as the output. So if you're in this range, it's Inc A. If this range is Inc E. So now you have the format used as a variable name. So now you say line is equal to the input because you need it as a numeric variable. Now you use put n, which you're using the variable you're looking at is the income estimate, which is these different values. But now you want to map it based on the format you're using. So if you're in the income, if you're using Inc A, you're going to get these values, and if you're using Inc D, you're going to get these outputs. Now here you don't put a dot, so a dot indicates it's a format. And then it confused a lot of people initially, and there was some SAS blogs mentioning it. And so I said, well, Jonas didn't indicate to put a decimal point. And I think you probably gave him more dimensional formats.
Thank you. Really cool.
I would like to ask something. I remember the initial conversation you're having about using formats. Something came up about using a format as a function. And I seem to remember doing this on a project quite some time. I have actually been there. And I think I don't think we went the picture route. We just used the straight format. And the problem there is it goes from numeric to character, and you have to change it back into numeric to carry on. Just thinking if we use the picture format, would that solve that problem?
What to create?
Just thinking off the top time ago, I can't remember the details.
To create a character label as a numerical label.
So it would be. You'd have some data, and there would be some algebraic calculation around it. But the result would be, because you'd say put this value using this format to this value, and it would arrive as a character, because that's the normal functionality of a format.
Right. So then, if you don't want it as a character, you would take that character result, this whole thing here, and use an input function to 4.2, or you can even use best dot.
Yeah.
So then this cost now is going to be.
I was just thinking.
Yeah.
So that was the using the normal format functionality, but does the picture mean that you don't have to do that, or you still have to do it? You still have to convert back from the
that's a good question.
Character to numeric.
I'm not sure about that. A lot of times you're modifying, let's say, reports, tabulates, PROC reports, and let's say you don't want to divide some variables by 1,000. You don't want to go back in a data step and divide something by 1,000. You could do it by modifying the number as it comes out. You would have to look at the contents you get when you run the picture format. And if that creates it, then that's part of a data step.
I think I remember it was something to do with the way that the file is set up when you do a control
Control in?
input.
Yeah,
You know, that the file is set up that the label is always going to be character, and I think that was the kicker, that you had to do it that way. But that was for a
Yeah.
normal format, so I didn't know if it would still apply to the picture format route.
I think you're stuck. Sorry, can you go back to that slide, Jonas, before with the purple box?
yeah,
I mean, so that bottom statement is always true.
yeah,
Put always returns character. So
Right.
a picture format is going to return character if you use it with a put, just like any other format.
right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Fair
with
enough.
picture, yeah. Now you gotta be careful.
But
of
it was
picture, yeah.
Yep.
You know, we were looking at some financial metrics for different customers or different offers, and we lost the negative sign. So what we're simulating here is very bad credit. Why is the MPV so high for these guys? So, oops, we went back in and put extra zeros, and now it came out as a negative. So you gotta be careful with that truncation.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Then on that note, Jonas, I want to say thank you very much for a very insightful presentation from all of us. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yeah. If you want to see something on tabulates, I could do that. A lot of people hate proc tabulate.
Well, I think proc tablet is very powerful too. I think proc tablet was one of the first things that I learned from
Right.
SAS when I was doing it. A couple other announcements. We're not going to have a January event. We haven't scheduled much yet, February onwards. So if anyone else or Jonas or yourself have any ideas to what you would like to present next year, please do contact myself, Alan, Valeria, and we will agree on next timing and scheduling. But next event will be the first Thursday of February.
So there've been 100 people join this meeting, or?
I think it was close to 24 people at one point we have 20 people now, and I think 24 we had on this meeting.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, it was very good.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. We'll publish the recording in about a day or two, so we'll be on the YouTube channel with the links in the usual social channels.
Oh, YouTube channel.
Yeah, we have a few there now. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.